everyone, Matt DiNapoli here. I'm a manager of developer advocacy with Cisco Developer Relations.
Hello, Snackers. This is Kareem Iskander. I'm a lead technical advocate with Cisco Learning and Certifications.
And welcome to episode 105 of Snack Minute.
Snack Minute is your weekly 10-minute bite of learning covering tech, coding, and some cool stuff that we work on here.
And today we have the brain trust. That's who I call them. We are joined by Ann and Adrienne. Before we get into it, would you guys mind introducing yourselves?
Okay, I can go first, sure. So I'm Ann Gentle, and I'm the leader for developer experience at Cisco for external developers, where we basically work with product teams, help them improve their APIs, bring back the feedback, all those good things.
Good.
All right, and I'm Adrienne Moherek. I'm the developer experience technical lead, and my primary focus is on documentation.
And we have you guys on here today to talk about inclusive language. Would you mind starting to kind of introduce the audience to what we mean when we start to talk about inclusive language?
Yeah, I think when we say inclusive language, what we're trying to say is let's use language communication in a non-harmful way, non-offensive, non-racist, non-biased, and when we think of language, we think of just talking normally, but we can also apply it into our workplace, into the code, into the chats that we have, and also think of language covers a variety of content. It could even be like the log files when you're troubleshooting, and so we're just trying to figure out, what's the best way to make the language across Cisco's products and portfolio more inclusive.
That's cool.
So what is Cisco actually doing about that then?
So Cisco actually has a program manager within the Social Justice Action Office. So centrally, we're going to teams, and I do it as a side hustle, right? So Molly Doss and I go around engineering teams and see how they're doing. We've put some tools in the centralized location. So there's an open source tool just to run an inventory. So it uses the GitHub API. It will list out, okay, what word is in, what word is in there, what file is it in, all the way to like the link to GitHub, right? So that way you can start to say, well, what do I have, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where you have to start is, okay, that didn't compile for the last 10 years. I'm not touching it. And that's fine, right? So we're basically working with teams. You make a plan, you fit it into your product schedule, but just keep reporting back to the middle because we want to show progress, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'd like to ask this, and from an education perspective, what are some examples of inclusive languages that you would see in tech that you kind of flag to change to more of an inclusive examples?
So what Cisco is doing is prioritizing 4 words to replace everywhere in our products, in our documents, in our log files, and those 4 words are master, slave, whitelist, and blacklist. Okay. And the replacements could be primary, secondary, or allow list, block list, or permit list, block list. And so those are the first primary words that Cisco is going after and figuring out, okay, first get an inventory of all those words and where they are, and then categorizing them and prioritizing them. So it's like, okay, is this a quick fix that we could swap out the word, or is it going to break something? Right. So obviously we don't want to break something. So then it's like coming up with a plan of like, okay, we will work to change the quick fixes first, and then look at, okay, maybe for the next version of a product or an API, then in the next version, we'll make those replacements.
So I can think of it. So Cisco's 40-ish years old almost? Yeah. So 40 years of product, 40 years of software development, 40 years of technology. I can hear, some people, their gears are churning, they're going, well, we've always used these terms. So, black list, white list, and master and slave and those things. it's just technology terms, but, why now? What has changed that has kind of pushed this initiative from Cisco? And to be honest, we've seen this in other places like GitHub and
Right.
other areas like that.
Did actually, sorry to interrupt, but
No,
did GitHub actually change their
Their
main
default.
range, their default?
Default is no main.
Is main, okay.
They
Yeah.
changed it in October of 2020.
Oh, wow.
Right, but the entire, to get all the features that they needed, it wasn't until like December 22. And so actually 2020 was when Cisco really started taking a look at Black Lives Matter movement. And we were just saying, what can we do as, as people, as technologists? And, Chuck Robbins, our CEO, he wants to power an inclusive future for all.
Yeah.
It fits really well with Cisco's, kind of our beliefs, what we want
Our
to
culture
do
is all about
in the tech industry,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, but I mean, as far as like, why change these? I think it's a valid question, absolutely.
Mhm.
But the thing is, like, most of our competitors are changing them already. So like, let's get with the program, let's get modern. I also have found, I've done a search for a word, like a profane word, right? So if just imagine, like, if you had to type a
Right.
profane word every day just to do your job. But I mean, I scanned the entire Cisco documentation base, and there's no profanity of the top 4 words I thought of.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So like, I think that's kind of where we're getting to. It's
Right.
like, you
So
know
it's
what, this is
possible,
just
is what you're
inefficient.
saying.
Yeah.
It's just inefficient, or it's just people will start to realize it's unprofessional.
Mhm.
I'm talking to recent grads, and they're like, yeah, we saw Master in something, and we were really surprised. So like, it really is a part of like what's coming and how we get to a point where everyone just assumes like, oh, I'm not going to use that.
Right.
Yeah.
I do remember this was a while ago, about like 10 years ago, maybe even longer. I was having to reformat some hard drives, and that terminology was being used. And I remember it making me feel a little uncomfortable even then, when we weren't even talking about using those words as biased words in a technology space. So I'm personally glad to see that these things are being addressed, and that Cisco is having a hand in leading that charge.
Yeah, I second that. Like, I know we do a lot of talks and presentations at events, and one of the talks that I do is around GitHub. And before 2020, it was about, the master branch, right? And
Yeah.
so like talking about that even then was like, should we be saying this? It should be something different. Like,
Yeah.
we're modern now, like a little bit. So like we should,
Yeah.
it's a different mindset, but it does, I can see why we're doing this, because it does make, as a person, it does make me uncomfortable to use those words.
So we talked about replacing them, getting them out of what exists today. How do we take the steps, both internally and externally, to make sure that we're educating the engineers, the code writers, the doc writers, from having these kinds of things sneak back in?
Oh, I was gonna say, there's actually multiple approaches going on within Cisco. One, from just the technology standpoint, you guys talk about CI/CD pipelines, right?
All the time.
Okay, so, whenever somebody wants to commit new code, it needs to be tested. And a lot of times, and you could do that in a CI/CD pipeline, why not put those words in there so it can be tested and verified. And if somebody, a new engineer on your team is, using any of those terms, it'll automatically kick it back, And so that's one way that you could help prevent it from sneaking back into your code.
That's a smart way of doing it.
Yeah, you do all the work to get it out, don't let it back in, right? So, yeah, I mean, we've been talking to engineering teams, we're kind of like their mitigation strategy. So you can do that in the beginning. You can start with that and just see what you have, and then, or do it after you've got your plan in place. But that's, there's linters like, one's called Get Woke, that's open source. Another one is just called Alex. And you can tune it. And so in that open source repo I mentioned, you can get the Cisco policy, right? So it has all the words that we're banning and the words that we're replacing. So it's a nice, like it's a linter, it's a tester, but then it also has suggestions, which is what you need, right?
So we do this today, like for some of the content that we write in Cisco U tutorials on GitHub, is we actually use linters to check metadata tagging, make sure that we have the proper, tags for specific markdown and whatnots from a tech perspective. But this is brilliant to be able to like bring that into these 4 vocabulary words to be able to check for them. I mean, it would be a no-brainer, really. It would be like a one line.
It's the easy one.
Yeah.
Inventory is okay. planning is okay, but I tell you what, CICD,
Yeah.
there's linters, you can do it, yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's great. No,
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it. I wouldn't have thought about it. I wouldn't have thought about it.
And we're lucky enough to work for a company that's policy driven top down in this instance.
Right.
And so that's not always the case for engineers, that's not always the case for tech companies. And so, I would say, and would you argue, this kind of almost started grassroots inside Cisco
For
and then was something that was picked up to be pushed top down. So, I would encourage those out there that might be working in situations that just aren't aware of the current scenarios and how those words can be used to, think about it, potentially bring it to your leadership and say, hey, this is something that we should really think about engaging on. Because it's been successful at a big company like Cisco, it's been successful at a big company like Microsoft. And so, we're seeing traction in these things and support from the tech world in general to really provide a more inclusive future.
Yeah.
We are unfortunately out of time. Adrienne, this is your first time on, which I've been on every episode except for one.
Shame on you.
And I cannot believe this is even true, but this is your first episode. And for everyone that comes to Snack Minute for the first time, we ask them this very important question, which is, what would your superpower be and why?
It's a hard question because I want to answer in a way that benefits all of you. You know what I mean?
Oh, because of the topic that we've been
You
talking
know,
about?
yeah. We're like, I want to solve world hunger and world peace and stuff. But at the same time, I'm like, man, it'd be really cool to teleport because think about it. Like, we've traveled around the world with Cisco Live, and I'm like, oh, if I could just go back to that one restaurant for dinner, just teleport there and have dinner, like, at that restaurant, or hey, go see my family up in Jersey, like just bam, 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 that'd be pretty nice.
You can make it inclusive by saying everyone can teleport. And
There you go.
that would
There
be
you go.
awesome.
There you go. Everybody can teleport.
We're gonna have to change that. A lot of people's things revolve around food.
Right.
We're gonna have to change this to dinner time.
No more snacking.
Yeah.
Ann and Adrienne, thank you guys for joining us on another special episode of Snack Minute. We really appreciate your insight and your opinions on these things. And everyone, thank you again for another great Snack Minute. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Snackers.
Thanks.